So we are in Hebrews. We just finished chapter 3 last week. We're jumping into chapter 4 here. I'm going to open by just reading the first two verses here, and then we'll get into it. So it starts in verse 1 here, Hebrews chapter 4. They write, "Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the good news proclaimed to us, just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard did not combine it with faith." Now, where we left off in chapter 3 is the writer of Hebrews is using a story to the people that he's writing this to. The people that he's writing it to are the Hebrews. These are the Jewish folks. These are, in particular, Jewish Christians who are being pressured to kind of slide back, and they're not to make Jesus such a big deal, and let's just either to give up Jesus completely or just kind of embrace more just the traditional Judaism kind of before Jesus came, kind of works-based faith. And the writer here wants him to understand something, and so been using this story that they all know, which is the Israelites coming out of Egypt, and kind of teaching some lessons from that, and kind of using it as a parallel to what he's writing about with God. Now, if you don't know the story, just real quick, the Israelites were under captivity in Egypt for like 400 years. God sends Moses, sends him with this message to tell Pharaoh to let my people go, tell the people I'm going to bring him into this promised land, this land flowing with milk and honey, give them this rest. And he also sent Moses with his power, the power of God. And, Moses, that's where the plagues happened, because Pharaoh was not keen on just letting all of his free workforce go. But, finally he breaks down and he lets the people go, and Moses leads them off into the wilderness and kind of taking them to the promised land. And all along the way, they're seeing amazing miracles, and yet they keep messing up. There's kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is it's God showing up. He's guiding them. They wake up in the morning. They have bread from heaven, this manna on the ground. Just wake up and there's food, which is pretty good when you're in the wilderness. Don't have a way of feeding yourself. At night, so they didn't get cold, they'd have a pillar of fire with that right there, you'd think, like, that's not an everyday experience. Then they'd wake up, and during the day, it's hot out there, and they're wandering around, so a cloud followed them all the time by day, which that'd be weird, right? Every time you step out your house and it's hot out, there's just this cloud that just follows you. And they're given water to drink. There's these miracles, but then they got the ugly part of it, they continue to whine and complain. They continue to turn their backs completely on God. These are the ones that Moses has gone for a little bit getting the word from God, and they decide, well, let's just create a golden calf and worship that instead. And anyway, all this finally they get to the promised land, and God tells them, now go take it. And they say, well, first wait, let's send some spies and kind of check it out. So they send these 12 spies. 2 come back saying, yeah, we got this because God said we had it. And the other 10 are like, there's no way. These guys are huge. We are like gnats on a donkey's behind compared to these guys. Like, there's no way we can take these guys. And everyone listened to those 10 that said we couldn't do it. So God said, okay, then you will wander here in the desert and wait till you all pass away, and then I'll bring in the next generation in. That's what happens. That's why they wander for 40 years out there. They had unbelief. They wouldn't just trust in God. So they all know this story, right? The people he's writing to. And so the writer here, when he comes in and says, listen, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, right? So these people are going to come into God's rest. And he's writing here, the rest of God still stands. What's that rest? That rest is salvation, entering in with God. And so he's kind of making that parallel, right, to salvation. He says, since that still stands, since God still wants to bring us into his rest, he said, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. So he's like, in the same way that our ancestors, didn't that first generation didn't enter into the rest because of their unbelief and because of their hard hearts. They were just rebellious. They didn't believe God that they could do it. Then that's indeed what happened, is then they would not enter into that rest. They're like, don't be like that. Let's not fall short that way. He said we also have the good news proclaimed to us just as they did. What's the good news? The good news is salvation through Christ. That God is still bringing us and guiding us to enter into his rest. And Jesus sort of made the way. He sort of kicked this door open so that we can enter in again. And it says there, he closes that part out, but he says, but the message they heard was of no value to them because those who heard did not combine it with faith. You know, that faith is a big part. I mean, just coming in and hearing the gospel message, hearing about God, hearing about, you know, what Jesus did, and he died on his sins, and he makes a way. You can hear that stuff, you can understand that. If you don't tie faith to it, it doesn't really do any good. And it didn't do any good for these people. I mean, the point he's making is, so these Israelites, you know, you say, did they finally got into the promised land? They did finally get into the promised land when the first generation all passed away. And they kicked the bucket. And then he tells Joshua, okay, now go take it. And Joshua's like, all right, let's go. But Joshua still had to go take it. He still had to put together the army and go out there. And that's, if you ever grew up in church, remember hearing the story of walking around the walls and blowing the trumpets, and seventh time and the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. Or the song, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. That's what that's all about. So he still had to go in and still had to do it, right? But I tell you something. I've been around a few brass bands. I'm telling you, there's no brass band that can bring down walls, right? God did something there. But they had to have faith. They had to believe that he could do it. And so the writer here is saying the same thing with your salvation, is you need to understand that you're hearing this same message, that you're being called into. Jesus says, come to me. He says, put your faith in me, believe in me. And he's like, you just have to have that faith that you do. But see, here's what can happen to us as it did the Israelites. Right? The Israelites say, okay, God's telling me to go in there, but then they go and look and they sent in spies to see, but can we really do this? And when they saw that those men were big, they thought, we can't do this. And you know what? They were right. Without God, they couldn't do it. But they weren't willing to trust him. Oftentimes, with faith, with our own salvation, we know we're supposed to trust in Jesus, but we think that's just the starter thing, and now I have to earn it. And you think you need to earn your faith. And so you build these little bricks of self-righteousness. So I have to do this, and I have to be like this, and I have to do this and that. And what happens? You fail. You can't do it. And the writer here is saying, and you're going to miss the whole thing anyway. You're trying to do it yourself. No. Just trust in him. You know, so the Israelites, they heard a gospel message, if you will, right? God's going to bring you into this rest. We're hearing a gospel message today. Same message. Let's not have the same response that they did. Because the good news without faith, it's just noise. It doesn't mean anything. But when you put our faith in Jesus, then everything changes. So don't treat just the cross like the starter kit. Right? That's kind of, that gets you, and that's your starter kit. And now you got to do a bunch of stuff to earn your faith. You got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to be this person, you got to do this, and you messed up, and you're sitting there taking, account of your life. Well, I was pretty good, and, I'm kind of nice to people when they're nice to me, and I'm only mean to the people that are mean to me, and you're kind of what you're doing is you're trying to create your own righteousness. Guess what? It doesn't matter. You can't earn it. There's good news in that. It's simply just trust in Jesus. Entering into that rest. Just understand God, God's got this. My salvation comes through faith and through faith alone. Believing that Jesus did the work and it's not up to me. Amen. He goes on to write, starting in verse 3, he says, now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God had said. So I declared, and he starts quoting Old Testament here. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. And yet his works have been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, quoting again Old Testament, on the seventh day God rested from all his works. And again in the same passage he says, they shall never enter my rest. I think, what is he talking about here? Okay, the writer here is being clever. Again, he knows who he's talking to, and he's using these stories that they understand. And not all of us are Old Testament scholars, so some of it's kind of like, what? But what he's kind of trying to make this connection to is, it's kind of neat. It's this idea of like, okay, there's this rest that exists, right? Now, what we see can happen as an example of the Israelites is if God's inviting us into his rest, if we just say no, if we just don't believe, we don't have it, then it's no soup for you, right? Then there's not the entrance. The entrance is denied. The rest isn't taken away. It's simply hardening of hearts, and you just don't accept it. That's what happened to the Israelites. The neat thing about it is this idea of rest, he kind of quotes scripture, quotes real early in Genesis. It talks about on the seventh day, God rested. This was before he made man. This was before anything. And what the writer here is saying, he's like, just so you know, this rest that exists, this rest that God's inviting us into, it's the rest that has existed forever. It's the rest that has existed before sin and death came into the world, before any failures came in. Before any rebellion came in, there was rest. You say, why is that important? Because, see, it's not that this idea of this rest or this salvation is some new thing, recently just 2,000 years old. God had to create another plan. You see, what Jesus did is Jesus kicked open the door to restore the original plan. God's original design for us is to always be in his rest with him, where we're resting in him, where we're with him. Sin and death came in that and messed that thing up. And this is what's so amazing. When Jesus comes in through the cross, he opens that door again and invites us back into that rest. It's not a new rest. It's a rest that has existed from the very beginning, which is kind of cool. The reason he's explaining this is he's wanting these people that understand, again, because they're sort of being tempted to kind of go back into their old way of thinking. Some of them are probably struggling with thinking, well, scripturally, it talks about God's rest there, but that rest, what he's talking about, that was just a thing in time. That was for the Israelites. That was just a reference to the Promised Land. And maybe that talk was going on, and that's where he's kind of pointing in and saying, no. Rest has been way bigger than that. And he kind of explains that too, even in the next section. But the warning here is the wilderness generation, they heard the invitation into the rest. They hardened their hearts. Not because the rest was revoked, not because it was removed, but simply because they wouldn't stop trying to get there themselves. That's kind of what they were doing. They were shown the door to the Promised Land. Hey, go take it. And they thought they had to do it. And they said, but we can't. And God's like, I know. That's why I'm here. And because of their unbelief, they couldn't enter in. Because it was about their striving. They're striving on their own. And sometimes we do the same thing. So again, he's writing here, like, it's not about you. You have to strive all of that stuff and keep working harder. It's not about that. There's this rest. It's existed forever. Jesus kicked open the door. We just have to accept it. And then the writer goes through again and says, understanding kind of this idea that they may, you're quoting Old Testament, but that was just for back then, and that was just for the Israelites. He goes, since, in verse 6, since therefore it still remains for some to enter that rest. So he says that rest still exists. And since those who formerly had the good news proclaimed to them, the Israelites, that they did not go in because of their disobedience, again he appoints a certain day. The day is today. He did when a long time later he spoke through David. So kind of what he's saying is, again, they're kind of probably struggling with this thing if you're talking about this rest, but it was way back here in the timeline. This was hundreds and hundreds of years ago for these people. And he says, yeah, but God spoke through David about rest, and he said it's for you today. David was way after that part of the Israelites. So he's like, if God only meant it for there, why does all this time later through David, he speaks of it again? Again, he's answering questions for the people here. I don't think any of you are probably struggling with that, but, you know, the more you know, right? As G.I. Joe taught us in the 80s. Knowing is half the battle. So he says, today, this he did a long time ago when he spoke through David, as it was said before. Today, he's quoting the Old Testament here. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. Today. And he says, for if Joshua had given them this rest, right? Because Joshua eventually brings them into the promised land. He says, if that was it, that was all he was talking about, and Joshua had already given him that rest, God wouldn't have then later through David spoken about another day. He says, there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. This Sabbath rest translates as a kind of a perpetual ceasing. Means it's done always. The rest is always there. The rest forever. And he's like, this is God's rest. It started in the beginning, and it continues till now. He's asking us to enter it. It wasn't just this little thing in your, nation's history of this time here when they entered into the land of Canaan, which Joshua finally brought him into. He's like, no. God is calling us to a rest. He's calling us today to enter into this rest of his. And we simply have to believe and not have those hardening of hearts. And the thing to remember is the Sabbath rest day isn't just a day off. All right, it's not a sit back and chill out. But it's this kind of new creation's heartbeat where God's people cease from this self-salvation, us trying to do it on our own, and we sit down in the rest and we sit and feast with God. It's this, again, this idea of just, God's calling us into something, calling us into this rest, and all we have to do is we just have to have the faith. You don't have to do all the stuff. But then you think, oh, but Pastor Phil, I've sat here and I've heard you tell me I'm supposed to love God. I'm supposed to love other people. I'm supposed to forgive those that are jerks to me. I'm supposed to pray for my enemies. I'm supposed to be generous with my time. I'm supposed to be generous with my finance. I'm supposed to help those in need and help to feed the poor and the hungry and do all of this stuff. Sure sounds like there's stuff I need to do. Paul in Romans, if you were here when we went through Romans, the first 11 chapters, Paul very eloquently lays out how salvation is faith alone. Faith alone. That we can't do it. We can't be good enough. And then in chapter 12, he says, therefore, in view of that, in the understanding that we can't do it, that we just have to have faith, what is our response? He says, do we keep on going sinning? He says, no. Offer yourselves as living sacrifices. And the idea there is to then see, okay, God, I'm entered into your rest. What you had planned originally from the start of when you hit creation. I'm in your rest. What do you want me to do? And you go through and we talk about these things, and there's sometimes some overwhelming things that you hear, when you think about, I'm supposed to this, I'm supposed to love people, I'm supposed to do such and such, and you sit there and think, I can't do it, it's too hard. And you know what? The good news is, you're right. You can't do it. Think about Israelites, God saying, go take the land. They couldn't do it. Those guys were bigger than them. There's no way they could do it. But God still brought them there, and that was still his plan. But they had to make the step into that. Sometimes in our faith, we're in different spots in our faith, and when we love God and we want to be good, and it's like we're trying to. Growing up, my uncle would always use this analogy of remember the wrestlers. I don't know if they do it as much. I'm not a big wrestling fan anymore. But in the 80s, that was kind of cool, right? And you'd see the different wrestler guys get up there and they'd like do the hype videos. Oh, I tell you what, that man better watch out, brother. And I'm going to come in, right? And they're like, yeah, you get all hyped up. He says, we come in on Sunday and we try to get all hyped up and I'm going to be good and I'm never going to sin again. I'm going to love everyone, this and that. And then you get out there and 3 hours in, you die. I failed. I'm worthless. I have nothing to offer. This is too hard. And you drag yourself back in on Sunday to try and hype yourself up again. Oh, I got this, man. You better watch out, devil. Now we go, we fall again. What's going on? Here's the good news for you. You can't do it. Then I don't do anything? No. You do it with faith. You start stepping in and giving what you can to him because it's not about you. It's about him. It's kind of like, hey, Adderley, can you come up here and help me? This is my niece, Adderley. How you doing?
Good.
Good. You like music?
Yeah.
Do you play any instruments?
No.
Okay. Could you play a song with the band, like lead them in a song?
Probably not.
Okay. Do you have faith that they're pretty good and that they can kind of help you out?
Yes.
Okay. So you've never played guitar?
No.
Okay. You're gonna play the guitar. Let's do this. All right. So you know how to put this around you? You're a little shorter than me too, so that doesn't help. Okay. Nailed it. Oh yeah, it feels good, huh? Let's try and put this part a little further out there. Yeah, and then get this on your shoulder. Oh man, maybe this is going to be harder than I thought. Nope. There you go. And then like that. Yeah, good. Oh, you're nailing it. Man, she looks good though. Right here, let's come over here so all the people can see you. This is a guitar pick. Hold that in that hand. Now, can you just kind of cover all of the strings except for this one? Just like put your fingers on them so that you don't even have to push down, just as long as they're just on them. And hit this string. Yeah, like why don't you do it right down here? Yeah, there. And do it big. There we go. Okay. All right, again. There, you guys can hear that? You got to unmute it. No, she's on. We're good. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to hit that. Can you do that? Just do it with me. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah? Okay. So, can you play me maybe like a cool blues song? Okay. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. So start hitting it. Boom, 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 boom. There you go. This is what life is like. Keep going. You're rocking. So God comes to you. He tells you you're supposed to love your neighbor. I don't know how to do that because all my neighbors drive me crazy. Give them what you can. And you go and you got, God, this is all I got. Help me not to strangle my poor neighbors where I'm at right now in faith. But God, I believe you're big enough. And you know what? God is the greatest backing band you can have. You look and you see stress in your life and anxiety, depression. I'm supposed to have the joy of the Lord. How? It's too big. What can you give to God? And you just start giving it simple and you let him come in and fill in the rest. Right? Can you end it now? There you go. Woo! Rock and roll, girl. Thank you so much. See, you are now officially a rock star. You can play. Does this make some sense to you guys? We sit there and we look at it. First off, salvation, you don't have to do anything. You just trust in him. And then he says, well, he asked me to do these things, and, I'm supposed to read my Bible and learn this stuff, and you try to, it's going to pump you up. You can't earn anything. Chill. What can you give to him? Yeah, step forward. Joshua still had to get the guys together and say, I don't know how we're doing it, dude. Let's go. Okay, we're here, God. There's some giant walls in our way. Now what? We'll walk around them 7 times. Okay. We can walk. We can walk. And then blow those trumpets. We can blow trumpets. God used what they had to take down walls that they could not take down on their own. To take them into a rest, into a promised land. They could not get there on their own. Did they still have to do something? They did. You see the good news in this? The relief in this? It's not all up to me. Thank you, Jesus. This is what God wants. He wants you to enter that rest. And simply what he's asking you is just let go. Just trust me. Hebrews 4:10 says, for anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. See, when you enter into that rest, it's not about your works, about you making stuff happen. But you enter into God. Let God move. Let God move in your life. Let him use you. When you're struggling, I was supposed to be kind to my husband. But God, have you met my husband? I was supposed to be nice to my wife. She drives me crazy. My kids, I think they're demon-possessed. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Start trusting in him. Start doing the right things. You won't do them if you don't believe. Israelites would not step in there. They didn't believe it was possible. I'm not going to pray. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter if I go to church or not. Why would I go to church every Sunday? Why would I read my Bible? Why would I be nice to someone when they're a jerk to me? You don't do those things because you don't believe God. You believe money. If I said right now I'll give you a check for $100,000 if you just stop doing this, okay, right? You'd make probably some serious changes in your life. So if you walk to work for the next week, I'd write you a check for $500,000. How many would walk to work next week? Why? Because I believe in the money. Man, God's ask is so mild. Some of it's tough. Some of it seems like it's tough. The good news is it's not up. You don't have to do it all on your own. And he helps you with that.